Welcome back to the Leadership Forum, a space where corporate leaders share insightful takes on the human side of ingenuity. I'm Saquib Vali, explorer. Say hi to the future. The leader with us today is Rocco Rossi, CEO of Shift Canada. Rocco is a recognized transformational leader, board member, trade and investment promoter, investor, storyteller, coach, keynote speaker, and pilgrim. His unique blend of experiences intersects general management, philanthropy, public policy, politics, business strategy, and new media. Welcome, Rocco, and thank you for taking time out from your inspired schedule.
Thanks so much, Saquib. You read that exactly as my mother wrote it.
You know what? And it's all true, so it's all fine. All right, Rocco. So you know what? Why don't we give you the opportunity? Let's let our listeners hear in your voice how you would wish to introduce yourself to them. Weave in your unique blend of experiences by all means.
Well, look, I'm just about the luckiest person on earth. I am the son of two Italian immigrants who came to Canada with a very limited education, even in their mother tongue, and built a phenomenal life for themselves and their 5 children. And I've been blessed in this country to participate in a number of incredible initiatives, companies, and political movements, and charitable efforts, and have been super fortunate to have incredible teams in all of those endeavors that have consistently made me look better than I deserve.
I think every single individual that I have spoken with, and I have had the opportunity of being with you on one of the forums on McACO forums, I think we all owe you a ton for your service and the work that you do, Rocco. Rocco, one of the human conditions that we at Say Hi to the Future explore is heartbeat. You know, and the way it goes is if one introduces heartbeat into spaces, they turn into places.
Yeah.
Houses turn into homes, or as your organization frames it, "Oh Canada" to "Go Canada." Speak to us about Shift Canada, and I noticed your email reads Shift 25. So unpack it all for us, please.
Right. Well, Shift Canada started life as Shift 25, based on some research from a sociologist at the University of Pennsylvania that pointed out that if you want to get to the tipping point of cultural change, you first have to get to 25% of the general public, and then things accelerate after that. Of course, by the time you've explained that, you've lost the argument. So the whole point is we want to shift Canada, and we've simplified the name, because ideally what we would like is to shift the culture to a point where we are more embracing, more celebratory of entrepreneurship, innovation, risk-taking, as not just great ends in and of themselves, but as incredible means to a better Canada for all of us. And it is at this crucial time in our history where, at the exact same time that many of our macroeconomic measures are going in the wrong direction, GDP per capita, our innovation rankings, our productivity rankings, competitiveness versus peers, at exactly that same time, we have disturbingly an increasing conversation and narrative that somehow anyone who has generated wealth should be immediately suspect. That is incredibly dangerous for the health of the country. Having a fairness lens is crucial in all societies, but you need a growth lens at the same time. And we saw a perfect example in the recent UK elections, where the leader of the Labour Party, a left of center politician, Keir Starmer, said, look, at my number one job, number one priority as Prime Minister is economic growth, because I can't solve the other problems without that. And that is what Shift is ultimately all about.
And this is such a great conversation to have. I mean, you and I both know and are friends with Tony Chapman. We know exactly
Yeah.
the sort of conversations that he's on. So I think there's a lot to unpack here. But for the benefit of our listeners, take us through what are some of the insights. So, for example, we said we want to shift from somewhere and go somewhere else, right?
Yes.
And so what I'd love to know is, what are some of those insights that you are anchoring in to say, here are the things that we want to shift? If you can enumerate a couple, I think that'd be
Oh,
great.
well, one, for instance, is just appetite for risk taking. And so there's an interesting program. I've inherited it. It's just completed its first year, called Shift Failure. And it ended up being picked up by 4,000 schools, over 100,000 students across the country. And it's 5 class lessons and activities for students grade 5 to 8 and from grades 9 to 12. And effectively, it wants to reframe how we think about failure, because today, the vast majority of Canadians think of failure in one of two ways: either as a mark of shame, and so therefore, don't try, don't take risks, because if you end up with failure and you're shamed, that's too big a price to pay. And so, in the immortal words of Homer J. Simpson, trying is the first step towards failing. Don't try. That is obviously incredibly dangerous and unproductive. The other side, which is too often thought of as well, is don't worry about failure because it doesn't matter. Winning doesn't matter. We're going to give a participation ribbon to everybody. And so failure has no point. That also is not constructive. What the Shift Failure is all about in those 5 class supplements is all about: failure is a significant thing, but it's only a bad thing if you let it be. If you look at failure as an opportunity to learn and say, what didn't I do as well as I could have? What can I do differently going forward? And so long as you get back up again, failure is actually rocket fuel for future success, and is a key attribute of all entrepreneurship, innovation, and economic growth.
I buy that argument for a second, but let's also continue this conversation, because this particular shift is pretty much what we've had with us for a very long time. This is not a recent phenomena.
No.
And so, because I mean, if you think about it, we used to pride ourselves on, we had Nortel, and then we had BlackBerry, and then we had even Fairmont and Four Seasons, and we had Bombardier, and we had a lot of these. However, none of them translate into global companies somehow, not as much as we'd hope, right? Mostly the idea is, we're the one who, even the conversations about how we are the father of AI, fine, I understand that. But in the end, the commercialization happens somewhere else. So it's not a recent phenomena, is what I'm trying to get to.
No, you're absolutely right. And look, in some respects, part of our problem has been our great blessings. As is often said, your greatest strengths often become your greatest weaknesses. We live in an immense country that has been endowed with incredible resources, a relatively small population next to the most dynamic economic market in the world, namely the United States. And so our ambitions have not had to be great to generate success that has been okay. What has happened in ensuing decades is the rest of the world has upped their game considerably. And so what was okay or good enough before is simply not good enough anymore. And that's why we believe that shift is more important than ever. It's about dreaming bigger. It's about taking more risk. We often pride ourselves in Canada that our financial services sector withstood the great recession of 2008, 2009, better than any other OECD country. And we often, will smirk sideways when we see a bank fail in the United States. There was a lot of self-congratulation when Silicon Valley Bank, for instance, failed in the United States. But guess what? They also have Silicon Valley. So
Yes.
their appetite to take risk means that occasionally you do fail. But that is, again, back to the shift failure, is not an end and is not a mark of shame unless you let it be.
It's funny. There's a movie, and I'm going to forget the name of it. It'll come to me, where the coach says to the team, "Failure is not the end. Don't turn it into one."
Right.
So you're absolutely right. Now, all right, got that.
Yeah.
I buy into that as well, Rocco. So having said that, let's say if we have sort of referenced the US, actually there too, quite a bit of it is they're not letting private companies fail, right? There's a lot of saving that happens, while capitalism is all about, yes, it's survival of the fittest, right? The ones who can will survive, and the ones who can't will fail. But in the failure of the few, actually a lot more seeds are sowed for some more great companies to come about and do that. So what's the urgency at this point? Where is it just that this is the right time? This is the moment to make it happen? So what's the urgency around this now?
Well, the urgency is when you have declining GDP per capita, when your productivity is not growing at the same pace as your major competitors, your standard of living will be at risk. We want to do many things in our society. We have an aging population. There's going to be incredible needs for our healthcare system, for aging, whether it be at home or in homes. There are lots of issues that we have in Canada in terms of economic reconciliation with our First Nations, Inuit and Métis brothers and sisters that need to be resolved. There are regional disparities. There's urban-rural divides. All of these things are exacerbated. All of these tensions are exacerbated when there is less to spread around. And that is what we are facing because we're in an incredibly competitive world. We're now in a world where you're beginning to see the formation of blocks. We're seeing greater geopolitical tensions. Canada is being asked to, pay its fair share in terms of its NATO commitment, getting to 2%. That's billions of dollars more. Where is this going to come from? And just one, simple example. I live here in Ontario, and Ontario is a quite prosperous province by Canadian standards, and we generate roughly $60,000 in GDP for every man, woman, and child in Ontario. Now, that's pretty good because next door in Quebec, it's about 54,000. So pat on the back, we're doing better. But if we compare ourselves with the 8 US states that border us in the Great Lakes, from New York to Minnesota, the average GDP per capita in those 8 US states is $20,000 more just to get to average. $20,000 times, in Ontario, we're almost 16 million people. That's $320 billion this year, next year, the year after that, just to get to average. Think about the hospitals, the schools, the nursing homes, the benefits that you could give to people in terms of education, in terms of social services. It is critical, as Keir Starmer put it, the number one priority for all government should be economic growth, because without that, you cannot solve the other problems.
Completely. All right. So let me just, and some of these might come as pokes, Rocco. I'm not poking in any way
please.
whatsoever, because all I'm trying to do is clarify for myself and for our viewers, right? In how some of these conversations are happening. So let's talk about AI for a second. Big announcement, $2.4 billion was apportioned to it. Compared to when you take a look at, just Sam Altman, how he's thinking about things, he's not talking about B's, he's talking about T's.
Yes.
He's talking about trillions. So how do we stack ourselves up in order to meet some of those competitive requirements?
No, it's great, and we often focus on the comparison because we're next door. So it's quite natural we focus on the comparison with ourselves in the United States. And they're an economy that's 10 times our size and population, et cetera. But there are lots of countries that are smaller than ours that also have to deal with the B's and not the T's in terms of investment. And have done a far better job, whether it's the Netherlands, whether it's Singapore, whether it's Australia. And why? Part of it is starting with cultures that actually celebrate entrepreneurship. Yes, it'd be nice to have the next open AI created, or ChatGPT created in Canada. But we have a $3 trillion legacy economy here. And if all of those companies became more entrepreneurial, intrapreneurial, if you were, in terms of the adoption of technology and procedures, the lift there is far greater than creating the next unicorn. So, and that has been the focus of countries like Australia, like the Netherlands, like Singapore, and is totally open to us, but not if we have a system where if people decide to focus in wealth creation and entrepreneurship, that somehow they're looked askance at, and that regulatory and tax policy builds up to be detrimental or ends up being an anchor as opposed to a kite that pulls us along, then you're going to end up with a result that is not healthy for the country.
Okay, so let's move the conversation, continue moving it along.
Yeah.
So if I were to think about, because I was at an event and Nina Tagri was there, and she was speaking about some things where there was a mention about how we are now inviting all these foreign companies to come in and giving them amazing facilities, etc. So Stellantis being one of them, and there are more. So Volkswagen being another. And that somehow the other doesn't sit well with me either. It's like, so if we want to improve, is it about bringing others in? Is it about us going outwards, or is it about us just becoming bigger inside? Like I'm trying to understand. There are different strategies. So
no.
Which one would you
pick? In a world where, look, we're geographically a very large country.
Sure.
But economically, we're roughly 2% of global GDP.
Yep.
So we depend to a far greater amount than the United States on trade. If we try to say to other countries, no, we don't want your capital, we don't want your investment, they're going to say, fine, we don't want yours. Sure. You're not going to buy our stuff, we're not going to buy your stuff. And guess what? That's going to make us a far poorer country. So the answer is a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. But it shouldn't be seen as, okay, you do Stellantis, you do Volkswagen, you do the Honda deal, you're done. No, that's where the work begins, because what you want to do to take full advantage of that, getting some anchor companies with new technology, is then to be able to vertically integrate and build out the supply chain right back to the mines. People focus on the green transition, and rightfully so. It's a key part of our future, a sustainable future. But guess what? There is no green transition without far more mining than there is today. We're going to need copper. We're going to need cobalt. We need lithium. We need rare earths. And Canada is incredibly blessed with them. But it currently takes almost 17 years to permit a new mine. So how do we lock in the advantages of these massive investments that have been made? They will only be, at the end of the day, be successful and seen as smart investments if we build out a local supply chain to take advantage of it. And that's where you get both the both and not the either or. It's going to be both foreign capital, domestic capital, foreign companies, domestic companies, and international trade. And that's something that we need to take greater advantage of.
Okay, so we've spoken about two shifts so far.
Yes.
One is a shift in mindset from a failure standpoint, and the second is shift in how we have so far thought about trade, and we need to shift that to think broadly in how that would look like, right? And part of that is also undoing a lot of red tape that happens when a company is trying to establish themselves, et cetera, et cetera. So got that. Before we move off of the shift conversation, because I got to get into a few other topics,
Right.
Is there another shift that you want to speak about before we move off?
Well, I think another key thing is as important as natural resources are, the single greatest natural resource in any country is a human resource. And
Sure.
the country that figures out, the jurisdictions that figure out training and retraining, lifelong learning, are the ones that are going to do best. So we also need to be innovative and need to be far faster in evolving what our education, what our training systems look like, so that people are able to skill and upskill throughout their lives as the economy changes, which it will continue to do on an ever accelerating basis. And if we try to meet that challenge with an education system that was, devised in the 19th century, I don't think we're going to be as successful as some other jurisdictions that are going to adapt their systems.
And do you think that is because we've got some amazing education institutions,
100%.
right?
And we want to continue to build on that.
Correct.
And adapt it to the new circumstances.
Correct. So do you think this is hey, U of T, McGill, UBC, whatever, and many, many more amazing institutions.
Right. And George Brown and Centennial.
Sure. Correct. Yeah. What I'm trying to say is, is the conversation that, hey, education systems, do something about it? Is it the Ministry of Education that's going to do something about it? Or is it going to be catalyzed by Shift Canada and therefore some other ways? I'm just trying to get a feel for what's going to be the practical aspect of this.
No, that part is going to be, again, it's everyone's responsibility, including parents. I mean, I'm a perfect example. My parents told me at a very young age that they never wanted to see me on a construction site. Because they said, look, we came from Italy, we didn't have education, so we worked with our backs. That's what we did to put food on the table. But you're going to go to university. You're going to shower at the beginning of the day. You're going to go to an office in a nice suit and come home with clean hands. That is the definition of success. And guess what? My plumber can buy and sell me 4 times over. He's got a place up in Georgian Bay, another place down in Arizona, and he's running a $1 to $2 million EBITDA business where he gets to choose who his clients are because he's got a long waiting list. We need skilled trades as well. So we need to shift attitudes around the importance of all of these skills to our economy.
For sure. But just so we all can put the record straight, your parents should be very proud of you. But the funny thing is, so Rocco, I'm originally from Pakistan. Yeah. And one of the reasons why we left and decided to make Canada home is primarily because the dignity of labor, the dignity towards other human beings is significantly hire here, right? So when people say, okay, so what's the big deal? And I said, listen, I'll tell you what the big deal is as far as I'm concerned. Exactly to your point, whether it's the tradesperson who comes to fix something in my house, or the staff that comes to make the home tidy, or frankly, my friends, all of us get to a Tim Hortons to have a coffee. We all live the same kind of life, right? My kids are going to public schools, so are theirs. Everyone is having an equal shot and an opportunity to get somewhere, right? So those are the kind of things that are valuable, that we should for sure try and preserve as we're trying to shift a lot of things for sure.
100%. And I wish there was no such thing as prejudice and racism and systemic barriers. Unfortunately, there are in some cases, but far less here than in many other countries around the world. And so we should never be totally satisfied. We should always be working to make the system better, but we also shouldn't be criticizing ourselves so much and losing perspective of the amazing things that we have produced in this country.
Self-deprecating humor is Canadian. I understand. I completely get you. I get you. All right, let's shift a bit. So I'd also like to get your leadership take on ingenuity, right? And more importantly, the human side. And I think we got into some of this conversation, but what I'd love is, more on the human side of ingenuity as it relates to your organization's success. What's your take? When has it worked well? When has it not? What have you learned?
Yeah. Look, there is an old George Bernard Shaw quotation where he says, the reasonable man spends his life adapting to the world as it is, whereas the unreasonable man spends his life trying to make the world adapt to him. And so it therefore follows that all progress in human history depends on the unreasonable man. Unless you have ingenuity, unless you do things in a different way from time to time, like if you keep doing what you're doing, you keep getting what you got. And so ingenuity is absolutely critical. And I think we've just lived through one of the greatest petri dish experiments around ingenuity, certainly in our lifetime, and that is getting through COVID. And what all kinds of organizations, from the not-for-profit sector to profit, to businesses, to healthcare, to education, and the need to rapidly rethink how to deliver services, how to keep making a difference in the world, was absolutely critical in determining winners and losers. And so it's, ingenuity is needed in times of crisis. It's needed to generate growth. It's needed to then manage growth because, typically, as you well know, because you've been around, you've advised, and you've built businesses from small to large, the practices that you use when you're a 10-person shop versus 100-person versus 1,000 are quite different, and you have to be able to adapt and innovate in order to manage evolution of the process. Otherwise, you get stuck in the same rut. And as we know, if you simply stay in stasis, there will be others who will come and take your share away.
Okay, understand. How about leadership? What do you look for, groom for, nurture in the people whom you hire within right now at Shift? But it could be in the past, at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, or prostate cancer, prostate
Cancer
Canada.
Canada.
Thank you.
Look at for me, leadership ultimately comes down to the ability to get the most out of your team. Because it's interesting, as you go through your career and you start somewhere, regardless of what it is, you're judged on individual performance and your ability to be expert in something and deliver the results, whether you're a salesperson or a marketer or a great accountant, a great lawyer. A leader is not just about subject matter expertise. It's saying, as good as you may be, what got you to your current position isn't what's going to make you successful in the new one.
Yep.
What's going to make you successful in the new one is to take every gray cell you have in your brain and apply it to, how do I leverage the skills of everyone else around me? Because as bright, as talented as I might be, I'm never going to generate as much work as I can by leveraging the efforts of the whole team. And so I look for people who are going to listen, who are supportive, who are empathetic, who are looking to help solve problems with others, that look to give credit to others, to keep them, and their soul fed, so that they continue to bring energy and passion to their work. And that notion of servant leadership is really an important one that resonates with me. And I think, again, the service at the end of the day is, how do I get obstacles out of the way of my team and help them achieve their full potential? If I do that, the organization will prosper.
Okay. All right. I'll go with that. How about other business leaders? What would your advice be? And as you're working on towards your agenda at Shift, but what's your advice to other leaders right now?
Look, I think you have to be incredibly curious. You need to be reading, listening to podcasts. Life is moving and the economy is moving at quantum speed. And if you're not trying to follow it, you're going to be left behind in a very considerable way. So that would be number one. And number two is, we're going, not in all sectors, because obviously in construction you can't work from home, you have to be on the site. But a lot of leaders are now faced with hybrid workforces, and more people working from home. And I worry about that. I see it as one of the greatest challenges of leadership in our lifetimes, because if people get disconnected from the workplace, it will become harder and harder to onboard people, to help them into the culture of the organization, and to have a connection, to train, to mentor, to help them along their career path without considerable proactive effort. And if you require people to come into the office, make sure on those days when they're required to be in the office, you're not working from your computer. You're not working in front of a screen.
Sure.
You're actually interacting with people. You're spending the time with them. Make sure that people are coming into the office not because they have to, because of some rule, because they want to, because it's important to their career acceleration and to delivering results in their job.
So Rocco, let me try and see if we can do a bit of a push on the shift here as well. So, for example, why won't hybrid and remote actually become a massive unlock for a country like Canada, where we now have the labor of the entire world available to us, which at first only had to be, you had to commute an hour, whether it's by public transport or by car. I'm sure there's a nuance to this somewhere where, for sure, I completely buy the fact that, hey, we need to have in-person interaction and the connections that happen. But we also might need to change in how we perceive those interactions, and how regularly we want them. Because we're coming from the pre-pandemic level, And we are trying to apply that. So same way as in education, you can't use the 19th century models for a 21st century conversation. Is there room for a shift in that one as well?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, but what I would caution is that it has to be done with incredible intentionality. It
Done.
has to be done with building out new systems to make sure that you keep that connection. Because otherwise, if it's reduced to the only time your employee actually sees you is when they receive their biweekly checks, uh, then a company comes along and offers them $5,000 more a year and they're gone. Like, how do
Sure.
you build that connectivity and how do you help that individual reach their full potential so they're not just, well, I can do my back office anywhere, so this is the commodification of labor, right? And then I'm just looking, well, I'll do it in Bangalore because I could do it at a third the cost of doing it in Markham. But what's my connection then? And what is the loyalty to the company and the ability to serve and the ability to develop those people? So long as it's done with incredible intentionality and systems being built in, innovation in those systems, then yes, it's possible and it can be leveraged for greater impact. But if not, I think it's a very dangerous place to put it in, because think about it, if your job can be done by anyone in the world, anywhere in the world, then it will be. And
Yep.
then you're out of a job.
Sure. No, absolutely. Let me give you the last word. I'm sure you came into this conversation. There are things in your mind. Is there something, just because the way I've asked the question, that you haven't been able to communicate, which our viewers and our listeners would probably benefit from?
The only thing I would add is among the very kind things you said about me, I also think of myself as a pilgrim, and I've become an addict in the last 20 years to a series of pilgrimage paths through Western Europe, known collectively as the Camino de Santiago. And I walked into a bar after 20 kilometers of walking in February in Spain, when I walked 1,200 kilometers from Seville to Santiago and Muxia and Finisterre and then back to Santiago. And there was a wonderful barkeeper there who, when lunch was done and I was on my way out, he said to me, Rocco, never forget what Confucius said. And I said, Felipe, you're going to have to help me here, because Confucius said a lot of things. He said, no, the single most important lesson of Confucius is that we only have two lives. And the second life begins when we realize we only have one. If there is one leadership and life message to leave your viewers, it would be that lesson. So thank you very much, my friend.
Thanks a lot, Rocco. And the reason why I did not bring up El Camino de Santiago was simply because I was going to actually ask you, could we have you come back and do a whole episode just on that? Because it is a fascinating experience. So you know what? We'll leave that for another time. If you can, we would love to, because I think there's a lot to unpack in that one. But thank you again, Rocco, for taking the time, sharing your insights. Our listeners would love to hear more from you. We will tag you and Shift Canada in our show notes.
All the very best. shiftcanada.org. Come on in and join the movement.
Thank you.